Steve Kornacki is the national political correspondent for NBC News, MSNBC, NBC News, the election map expert. And it feels like you became an overnight sensation, but took you a long time to become an overnight sensation. Steve, thanks for joining us. What do people say to you when they see you on the street?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I guess one of the things about life in the pandemic is you don't see too many people on the street. So the few I've run into, though, the map guy, the numbers guy, still a few every now and then they'll say, "Hey, it's Chris Hayes." So I still get that.
How do you become the election map expert?
Honestly, it's a role I kind of always wanted. It's one that's kind of I think come into being in the last 20 years or so. It's funny when I go back and look at I love looking at kind of archive news footage, archive sports footage. I like looking at stuff from the past. I realized, just 20 years ago, back in 2000, Tim Russert was here at NBC, and the famous moment in the 2000 election when it all came down to Florida, a couple hundred votes. Russert didn't have an electronic board. He had a whiteboard, and he just wrote down Florida, Florida, Florida. And I think that's in the Smithsonian now. But I mean, that was technology just 20 years ago. So this, the idea of having a board with real-time data with numbers, it's really come in the last 10, 15 years. But, since it's kind of been around, I had my eye on it, and I got lucky about, it was 2014, actually. 2014, my boss here called me up about 2 months before the election, said, "Hey, we need somebody to do this. You think you could do something with it?" I said, "Yeah, I think I could." So that was the start of it for me.
How do you memorize all the counties?
I think it's just good old fashioned, staring at it, memorizing it, repeating it, pulling out the map, trying again. It helps. I haven't been to all these places. I've not been to more counties than I've been to. But, one thing in the last 6 years, I vacationed in Ohio about 2 years ago just to learn the state, to learn the counties, to get a better sense of it that way. That helps, but obviously I haven't done that anywhere. So really it's like cramming for a final. It's just memorization and repetition, and the memory kind of builds.
Who's better on the touch screen, you or John King?
Oh, come on. John King's the original, and nothing but respect for him. And honestly, I haven't seen a CNN election night since I've been doing this because there's no time to watch it. So I'm not qualified to say.
You're kind of like Lamar Jackson, and he's Michael Vick. Like he might have been the original, and then you're an updated version of it.
And he's still doing it. Hey, and Fox has someone doing it, and I don't want to get into anything with anybody. I try not to make enemies.
How did you end up on Football Night in America?
I got a call about a week after the election from my boss here saying the folks at NBC Sports, wanted to, talk to me, had a couple ideas. I was very excited to hear that. And, so we'd been talking for about 2 weeks before it, and, came up with the idea, I think, that, hey, it's December in the NFL. It's when the playoff race really gets serious. And I think it seemed like there really was a parallel there between road to 270 and an electoral map for a presidential election and road to the playoffs. It's all about scenarios. It's all about if this state goes this way or if this team does this. There really did seem to be an overlap there.
Give me a couple of teams that aren't maybe being mentioned as playoff teams, but you think they have a better chance than maybe a couple of teams that we think are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is now too counterintuitive. Watching the game last night, I know they were talking about this a lot, but Baltimore, sitting there right now at 7-5 would not be in the playoffs if they started today. If you just look at their schedule, they get Cleveland next week. And after that, it's three teams with losing records, so they've got a really easy schedule down the stretch. It's not hard to see them getting, to 10 wins. And you compare that like to Miami, who would be in right now in the 6th spot, Miami, a game ahead of Baltimore in the standings, sitting there at 8-4. Miami doesn't have a single game left against a team with a losing record. I mean, starting with Kansas City next week. So, the sort of the burden's on Miami to show they can hang on to that position against the kind of competition they're taking. And it just seems like the opportunity is there for Baltimore to leapfrog a bunch of teams here just based on that schedule.
When did you become fascinated with numbers?
It was when I was in first grade. It was I could tell you, it was the 1985-86 NBA season. I grew up outside Boston. I would go outside, get the Boston Globe every morning and read the Celtics box scores. And that was the best Celtics team ever. That was the big three: Bird, McHale, Parrish, and Celtics box scores that season. And then summer of 86 was the Red Sox. That was with the Buckner year. So the Red Sox were a thing that year. I got into baseball box scores. And, that kind of started numbers for me. And then a couple of years later, kind of got into politics really about middle school and kind of the numbers aspect of it too, I guess.
But the pressure on election night is different. Like you can be on football night in America and you might make a mistake and it's football night in America, but election night, how much pressure did you feel?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot there. And this year was more intense because there's just this added variable this year of people were voting by mail, and we knew the people voting by mail were going to be overwhelmingly Biden. And the people who were going out, and voting in person at their precinct on election day, we knew that was going to be pretty heavily Trump. And there was just this variable as the numbers would come in from a lot of places of, okay, are we looking at votes that were cast by mail here? Are we looking at votes that were cast in person today? Are we looking at a mix of both? Because that question in trying to be on top of that information was key to understanding everything that was happening. And that was just something, at a certain level, there's no preparing for it because we'd never had that before in an election. And so, yeah, I felt, I always feel a lot of anxiety before these things. This year, I felt about 10 times more than I have in the past.
How do you come off as unbiased?
I mean, it's probably a cliche, but the numbers don't lie, at a certain point. And I can, if I have it's true in sports, it's true covering politics. If you're cheering for a team in sports, there's no denying if they lose 17-14, there's no time left on the clock, then they've lost. The game's over. You got to talk about the next game. I think the same is true in covering an election. It wouldn't do me any good to be trying to kind of push it to one side or to push it to the other as the numbers come in, because they are going to ultimately all come in and we'll all be able to see what it is.
What happens if the touch screen goes down? What was the game plan?
It's happened before. It's how I made the Tonight Show for the first time in my life. This was in the 2016 election. I was doing a segment and the board went blank, completely blank, but the writing function on it, with my finger still worked. And the camera's still rolling. Nobody's telling me to stop. So I'm like, I got to improvise here. And we were talking about sort of, road to 270. So I said, okay, I'll draw a crude outline of the United States, and I can kind of talk about the different regions. So I tried to draw the United States, and it looked like it turned out it looked like part of the male reproductive anatomy. Jimmy Fallon noticed it. That was my first, you say overnight fame or something. That was my first taste of it.
Okay, but how do you react to something like that? I know I think you majored in TV and film at Boston University, but now I'm famous and I'm infamous. And so how do you process that?
Yeah, it was the thing about that was like, I didn't even realize it till things started popping up online. I really didn't think I had done anything. And then it was one of those, it was obvious. Once I saw it, I was like, okay, I see how everybody saw that. And of course I was on with one of my colleagues here, Hallie Jackson. And I think, she was standing next to me the whole time. And you could see when you look at the tape, she recognized it the whole time. And when something like that happens, my view is it's like, just own it. And, I kind of stepped in it and I'm not gonna make excuses for it. I'll just, I'll laugh along with everybody because it's kind of ridiculous.
Well, it's best to grab it and own it before somebody else does. I always tell people, and this has happened to me on numerous occasions, you make a mistake, own it, and then you take away the weapon that somebody else has when they're going to point that out. So you did the right thing where you just go, hey, I did it. I move on. Yeah.
And I think you're right. And that's what I try to do when it's a little bit more serious than a drawing like that. We've gotten numbers wrong. We've gotten, we'll get vote returns that come in and it turns out there's corrections and they change completely. And yeah, no, I do think that's key with the audience, just in terms of credibility. Don't try to pretend if you made a fool of yourself, don't try to pretend you didn't.
Based on the numbers, who would you put in the Super Bowl? Can you do something that far out of projection?
I guess this would be the Steve Kornacki gut numbers, because I haven't seen the updated, our partner is PFF, Pro Football Focus, and I haven't seen their updated numbers after last night, but just my gut on it would be Kansas City, in the AFC. And I think, probably conventional wisdom at this point. In the NFC, I'm kind of liking the way Green Bay's playing right now.
Okay. Well, wait, is this based off anything, or is this is your gut feeling?
This is my gut feeling, and it's also a sense of where the numbers. I haven't seen the updates, but my guess is between Pittsburgh losing, Kansas City hanging on against Denver, my sense is the numbers are going to shift pretty dramatically in the AFC here.
Give me your favorite county in the United States.
That's a good question. My favorite county. Well, I got to be partial to Middlesex County, Massachusetts, where I was born.
Is there a
But
favorite name of a county that you loved saying?
there's Outagamie County in Wisconsin, which has one of the funny. Wisconsin has the best county names. There's also where Ann Arbor is in Michigan, Washtenaw County. When you get to the upper Midwest, I think you get a lot of those sort of Native American names, and you get those are the ones where sometimes in my early days of doing this, I would call when I wasn't sure in the pronunciation on the day of an election, I would just call up like the county clerk's office just to see how they answered the phone, and that would be my answer.
Yeah, that's what's difficult is just making sure because I always point out that there was a movie, The Thomas Crown Affair, with Pierce Brosnan, and they mentioned in the movie that somebody is from Lima, Ohio. Well, it's Lima, Ohio, and if you're from that area, you're like, how could you screw that up? So you have to make sure you get it right. We might not know the county you're talking about, but the people who live in that county know the county you're talking about.
The locals do, and some of them are very, counterintuitive. You go down like where San Antonio is in Texas, it looks like Bexar County. It's Bear County, Bexar, and it's Bear County. That one took me a while to learn.
Hey, congrats on the success there, Steve, and hopefully we'll see you on football. Are you doing Football Night in America now the rest of the regular season?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to do it through the rest of the season. Follow the playoff race, look at the numbers change, and it's very excited for it.
All right, just be careful what you draw, okay?
Yeah, thanks. I think I learned my lesson there.
Thank you, Steve. That's Steve Kornacki, and he, of course, works for NBC, their national political correspondent, MSNBC, and he is the election map expert.